It's over. It's really over. Is what I would say if I didn't know that this first season was just a small part, if not even a prologue, to this much larger story waiting to unfold. And out of everything in this episode, the good and the bad, we will talk about it, the one thing that I'll say this episode did pretty well was it got me excited for where the story goes from here. They've built the Gun Devil up well as this looming, overarching threat and goal. They've built Makima up well as this very mysterious and foreboding figure. There's lots of questions and threads left to resolve, and overall at this point I'm just wondering, when's season 2, man? Hello everybody, I am Phenom Sage, and welcome back to the final, at least for a little while, Chainsaw Man episode review. Today we are going to be talking about episode 12, the finale, Katana vs. Chainsaw, and it turns out that missing last week actually worked out pretty well in my favor because I watched both episodes 11 and 12 together, and it really is kind of like its own mini arc or mini conclusion to this season. And I think the way that I experienced these episodes together is worth mentioning because it's very possible that it shaped a lot of my opinions about this final season 1 arc and a lot of the stuff that goes down, because I guess I'll just get it out of the way right now. I wasn't a huge fan of this final episode, I have to be completely honest. It's not that I didn't like it or that I didn't enjoy it, but it's more that when I compare it to a good chunk of this series, the way that this story knows how to handle its characters, the pacing and the tension of the story, the climaxes and emotional investment, it really does feel like this arc, and this episode specifically, didn't really have that kind of impact for me, and I think it primarily comes down to two different things. Because I want to make it clear that I do understand that this is not the stopping point of the manga. One of the biggest struggles these kinds of stories and these kinds of adaptations face is trying to adapt a chunk of the series in a way where they clearly can't just get to the end of the story. That's not going to happen. So they have to figure out a good pace and a good stopping point somewhere in the middle. And while I could complain about the place that they chose, I think conceptually it works fine enough. The gold standard for this kind of thing to me is something like Made in Abyss Season 1. I think that's about as good as it gets as far as concluding your season in the middle of a story and still having it feel really satisfying and impactful. With this, there's enough of a hook where we took down some big antagonists from previously in the season. We have a good lead into maybe a more substantial step in taking down the Gun Devil. They threw in some weird manga reader foreshadowing at the end. We'll talk about that later. They did pretty much everything that they were expected to do, and yet my issue really comes down to the fact that this arc, this mission, whatever you want to call it, just didn't feel that important. It felt very small, and I never really felt any kind of tension or stakes with what was going on. I mean, we're taking on the two people that 3-4 episodes ago were killing most of our division, including some major characters, and now we're facing them again, and I just didn't feel that same tension or weight of the situation. It felt kind of flippant and underwhelming. You could argue that at this point in the story you're not supposed to feel that same kind of tension or gravity, but if you're not, then what are you supposed to feel? They cliffhanged the entire episode last week with what I assume was a ploy at making you scared that Aki was about to die, but I didn't feel that. I don't know if you guys did, but that was just so obviously fake telegraphed that it took away any kind of fear or anticipation that I would have felt otherwise. Another counter I could see is maybe this little arc is to show you how strong the division members are now. Power and Denji went through training, Kobeni is more serious about her job, Aki has his future devil to work with now. I could see somebody saying that it's supposed to be more about showcasing their abilities, and yet I didn't really get that sense either. Like, sure, Power and Denji went through training, but we didn't see them actually grow. They just got their asses kicked a lot. Aki got the future devil, but he got it in like 2 minutes, and Kobeni, we didn't really see much of anything. The reason I say all of this is because I do think that there was a lot of potential in this final arc to give some very satisfying and emotionally powerful moments, and they do explore it to an extent with Aki and with Himeno and how that bond allows him to overcome Sawatari, but it feels like right as they start exploring that aspect of their fight, it's over. I mean, their entire situation is resolved within the first 5 minutes of the episode. There's not a lot of catharsis or emotionally impactful moments in that fight where it makes the fight feel satisfying and where it makes this final episode feel satisfying. I mean, Aki doesn't even get to fight her herself. She just kind of immediately gets captured and then killed later on, which, as a side note, felt like a huge missed opportunity for any kind of dialogue or characterization from her after she was beaten. The other fight of the episode was this Denji versus Katana Man fight. This is the showcase of the episode. It takes up, I want to say, a good third of the entire episode when you factor in all of their dialogue and confrontations. They even named the episode after it. This is the driving force of the finale, and yet, if you want to talk about missed emotional opportunities in Aki's fight, this fight has almost nothing to care about on a narrative level. This might as well just be some guy. And I'm not against having cool fights with random dudes, but when you're making it the centerpiece of the ending of your season, I would expect there to be a little bit more of narrative weight and emotional weight behind what's going on. I mean, this is the dude who essentially killed Himeno, and yet not only do I get the sense that Denji doesn't really care too much, which, fair enough, that's in line with his character, but it doesn't even come up between them until the fight is already over. So if you have this main duel between characters that really don't have much reason to fight at all besides the government told Denji to, and this guy is pissed about his Yakuza grandpa, then why should the audience care beyond just the spectacle of it actually happening? Again, I want to make it clear that I don't necessarily have an issue with this fight itself. If you want Denji and Katana Man to fight, go for it. But if this is the way that they intended to end this season of Chainsaw Man, I would have prioritized the storytelling and emotional weight of these fights in a way where they leave more of an impact. Maybe take the focus that you had on Denji's fight and put it with Aki instead, because he has the more interesting, emotional, and vengeful angle that leads to more interesting emotional payoffs. And he still did end up having the best emotional payoff in this finale at the end when he and Denji are kicking this dude in the balls for revenge for Himeno. That was easily my favorite scene in the episode, and I loved how they handled that. And I do want to shift over to talking about the stuff that I did like. I'm guessing a lot of people have already disliked and clicked off, but at the end of the day, I did still enjoy this episode, and it did get me excited for the future of this series. Although, admittedly, a lot of the stuff that gets me excited actually came in the previous episode that I did not review. For example, I loved the foreshadowing with Aki and his death in the future devil scene. I wish that scene was so much longer than it actually was. That would actually be a complaint for me about that episode, but I loved that entire scene for what it was, and I loved how we were kind of getting into the mystery of how Aki will eventually die. I also loved the foreshadowing with Makima. We're seeing her powers in action even more than we did before, and we see that she doesn't just have the power to make people explode, she has the power to just debilitate them from the inside, which I thought was super sick, and I can't wait to learn what is actually letting her do these things. We also get two key pieces of foreshadowing at the end of this finale that I'm not really sure what to make of, but it definitely leaves me curious about what's to come in the future of this story. One is a shot of child Denji inside of a dream where Pochita is telling him not to open this door inside of the alleyway. And if you recall, this is the exact same door and alleyway that they opened the entire season with in episode 1. So ordinarily, I would call that good direction and good writing. It's definitely interesting, but at the same time, this door and everything relating to it hasn't been brought up at all throughout the entire season, so it's not really that satisfying or interesting of a cliffhanger, but it still did end up leaving me a little bit interested in where they'll end up taking that, and I assume it has something to do with Denji's origins. Or maybe it was just a fun fan service scene for the people who have read the manga and know what that actually is, which also happens to apply to the other post-credit scene that we get this episode. We're a goddamn Marvel movie now, with this mysterious girl who apparently knows who Denji is, and her dialogue is a little bit vague and a little bit, mystery giving here, but I assume it's essentially asking him, if he prefers the life that he has now with this public safety division, or if he prefers the life that he had before this. I assume she's talking about before he got roped into serving the Yakuza, because let's get real, it wouldn't be referring to when he was serving the Yakuza. But on the topic of that, we still don't really know much at all about Denji's life before that actually happened, which I do find very interesting, and I do think that that could be the key to this girl and how she knows him and why people are after his heart. It would also explain the visual connection between this first post-credit scene and the alleyway and where we see Denji, and how the second post-credit scene has a shot that comes out of an alleyway and into the street and to this cafe. I thought that was a very nice directorial touch, and I think it might be alluding to something deeper within the story. All of this Denji focus aside, it's ironic with how much they actually give him, because one thing that I've been feeling throughout the season, and this episode kind of just cemented it in my head, is how obviously I can't speak for the remainder of the story that is left. I'm sure that Denji will continue to develop and grow and have a really good character arc. But as of this season 1 right now, not only would I say that Aki is my favorite character in the series so far, but I think this season is almost more so about him than it is about Denji. There's just so much in this season that is so focused on how he changes and develops and how his goals are taking him along this story. I absolutely loved the scene in the previous episode where he's in the car with Kurose and Tendo, and Kurose's always been this kind of asshole that is looking down on Aki and what he's trying to do. And I loved Aki's response to all of that in this car, where he says, "You can sit back and watch, and if I do end up losing and do get killed off, that's when you can go ahead and laugh." And there was a great moment with Kurose where he just said, "I'm still rooting for you, even though I think you're crazy." And all of that just really put into perspective for me what I've been saying about Aki this whole time, where he just doesn't have anything else in his life now. Yeah, his goals right now might be crazy, but it's really the only thing that he has left to live for, which is why he's going crazy with just no regard for his own life. I just find him to be such a compelling character, and it makes those moments like the end of this finale where he's finding genuine joy and happiness in kicking this dude in the balls for Himeno. That shit almost made me tear up. It was just so emotionally well done. It's what makes those moments hit all the harder, and I really would have tried to tap into that more in this finale beyond just the same flashbacks that they ended up using. Overall though, what can I say about Chainsaw Man that I haven't already said? Despite the gripes that I had in this final arc of the season, I still thought it was a great season. I don't want anybody to get me wrong here, and I thought it was a great introduction into this story. Fabulous pacing, amazing presentation and visuals. I think all of the main characters are great. It's got this really enticing and engaging thriller, mystery, horror vibe, which isn't really something you usually see in shonen. It's basically everything that I was hoping it would be before I actually started the series, and I can't wait for more. I always found it really funny when manga readers kept telling me, no, this isn't even the good part of the story. You have to wait until season 2, and then you'll understand why this story is so great. And while I'm sure that is true to an extent, and I'm sure that it does get even better in those future seasons, I still loved this season, man. I still think the story is already great in the current form it is, and if anything, I think they've done a really great job at establishing all of these pieces and putting everything in play so that when we do end up getting into season 2, we're practically already primed to start getting into some really great stuff with the Gun Devil and with these characters already having developed a lot so far. I can't wait for that. I think there's a lot of great stuff to come, and I hope that you guys will be here with me whenever that ends up happening. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this episode, and join the Discord server down below if you want to talk and tell me how wrong I was about everything that I said in this video. I'm more than happy to discuss it further with anybody who's interested, and I hope you guys stay tuned for whatever ends up happening next on the channel. I haven't really seen anything next season that I'm too interested in talking about. Maybe Vinland Saga, maybe I'll take this opportunity to go back to Land of the Lustrous manga reviews, maybe I'll make some more standalone chill videos about anything that I end up watching, Either way, keep your eyes on this channel and the main channel because I do have a lot of stuff that I am looking forward to sharing with you guys, including the top 10 anime of 2022 video, which I haven't even begun making and I assume will be a massive undertaking. Thank you all so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you in the next video.